Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about some intricacies in the London system, and we're going to focus on if you develop the knight to f3 first or the bishop to f4. And this suggestion came from ChessGoals member James. So let's start with d4 for white, and we'll first look at the most common move for black, knight f6. And at this point, let's say bishop to f4. So when we play bishop to f4 already on move 2, we're showing black, hey, we're playing a London defense. And the problem with showing black so early that we're playing the London defense is this move knight f6 is very flexible. So for example, in this position, c5 is a combative move that already puts a London player kind of on their heels, even though they're playing the white pieces. And I'm using a chess-based database only filtered to the top players. White scores 49% in this position. So black is scoring 51% to white's 49. So already there's a bit of a move order issue here. All right, so let's say after d4, knight f6, white plays knight f3. The most common move at the top level is to play g6. This is heading towards either a King's Indian defense, which is bishop here in d6, or a Grunfeld defense, which is bishop here in d5. So black is playing one of these more hyper-modern openings, trying to fight for the center a bit later. And at this point, if we play bishop to f4, this is not quite as strong as transposing back into a traditional King's Indian and playing c4. So for example, bishop g7, go with the standard London plan, e3, castle, bishop to e2. This is pretty good for white. This is 55%. White's doing well. That's a little bit better than the standard 54% or so that white scores at the top level. But if we go back to where we played bishop to f4 on move 3, it's stronger here to play c4. Now after bishop to g7, we have options. We can either go for more of a classical approach and play knight to c3, try to play e4, build that big center, or we could play a pretty strong move, and I like this one a lot, pawn to g3 with the kingside fianchetto, and after castle bishop to g2, instead of that 55% that white was scoring by committing to the London, white is now scoring 58%, which is very good at the top level play. So more flexibility in that line as well, starting with knight to f3. Okay, so let's back up here. d4, knight f6, knight f3. What if black plays pawn to d5? This is a trendy move as of late. Black doesn't want to commit to e6 because maybe this bishop can get outside of that pawn chain before black puts all of these pawns on the light squares, which normally would block in that bishop. So after pawn to d5, here white has the option of bishop to f4 or pawn to c4, and they both score about 54%. So 54% for white either way. In this case, sure, play the London bishop f4 if you're trying to squeeze out your maximum advantage. Pawn to c4, this will take us into either the Queen's Gambit declined, e6, Queen's Gambit accepted, or the Slav defense. So I think that's one of the major takeaways from this video is if you see black play both d5, knight f6, that's the moment where you should commit to the London by playing bishop to f4. Once black has played both of those moves, you don't have to worry about move orders in terms of maximizing your advantage. The London is just as good of an option probably as the Queen's Gambit at this point. Now let's go all the way back to move 1, d4, d5, second most popular move for black. All right, so let's say we play knight to f3 here, keeping that flexibility. After knight to f6, we're in that same situation. Pawn on d5, knight f6, both of these moves equally as good. They're both 54% for white. But what if we start with bishop to f4, the early bishop to f4? Now black can play a move like pawn to c5. Black has the initiative. Pressure immediately on this d pawn. We play e3. There's a line here where black can take. We take back. Knight c6. This has been pretty common lately at the top level. And after c3, bishop f5, white only scores 43% here. And the key thing to note is this knight on g8 has not committed out to f6. That gives black extra flexibility. So this is something where at the club level, maybe it doesn't matter too much, right? You just play your London system, play it against anything. But if you're at the master level or higher, or you really want to just work on squeezing the largest advantage you can out of the opening, you want to think about the flexibility for white and the flexibility for black and how these different move orders work together. So in this case, black might put the knight on f6, but they also might put the knight on e7. And let me show you an example. If knight f3 by white, pawn to e6, queen to b3, common idea trying to pressure b7, queen to d7 to defend, knight b to d2. This bishop is the last piece to get out, and note that it can't come to d3 because the bishop on f5 attacks this square. At this point, after knight b to d2, there's two moves for black that actually give a small stockfish advantage, and those moves are f6 and knight g to e7. What do you notice about both of those moves? Neither of them were possible if that knight were already on f6. And at this point, we already talked about white was scoring less than 50%. It was 43%. At this point, I think black is in the driver's seat and trying to press for a win. So to recap, in the London, I almost always recommend starting with knight f3, whether it's knight f6, knight f3, or d5, knight f3, because it gives you that flexibility of transposing back into a queen's gambit or back into a classical king's Indian defense. And only when I see knight f6, that's when I would recommend, if you want to squeeze the most advantage out of your position, that's when I would recommend you play bishop to f4, committing to the full London. So that was kind of a lot, and I'm nitpicking. This is definitely something where you don't have to worry about it if you're a club level player. But if you want to know some of the differences between those two moves, there you go. And I am working on a ChessGoals London course. It's going to be one of the next courses coming out on our website, link in the description. I will be recommending knight f3 on move 2, followed up by bishop to f4. And one of the main things I want to do in that course is make it easy to play and try to watch for black's counterplay. So I'm going to be watching for all of these c5, queen b6, attack b2 ideas from black, and I will give you guys easy ways to handle all of those variations so you can have a solid repertoire from the white side against anything black throws at you. All right, thanks for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, check out the links in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.